Okay, one of our main goals this week is going to be to explore tone in fiction. So we're reading a fictional piece right now. It's based on actual events, but it's called The Crucible by Arthur Miller. We've already read Act 1. You should have read Act 1 by today. So this lesson we're going to explore tone in fiction. We'll define tone, we'll talk about various types of tone, discuss how authors communicate tone, and practice identifying the tone of some writing samples. So tone is just one of those things in writing that you have to learn to identify and to use, and right now we're kind of working on identifying it and what it looks like and how we know what it is. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is called tone analysis. So what does the word tone mean? So just quickly kind of define it in your own words. Think about what you already know. You might have had your mom tell you one time in the past, watch your tone with me, or something along those lines. So was it an angry tone? Was it a sad tone? Was it a sarcastic tone? So thinking about all that, take a few seconds and just jot some notes down. Okay, you can pause the video if you need extra time. All right, so what does the phrase tone of voice mean? So again, thinking of the example with your mom or your dad, watch your tone of voice, watch your tone with me. What does it mean? What is it referring to? Is it referring to the words? Is it referring to the way something is said? So again, take a few notes on what you already know. Pause the video if you need extra time. Okay, thinking about what you just wrote, list 5 words that could describe a person's tone of voice. As an example, we have angry. Again, take some time, pause the video if you need to, write down 5 words. So right now we're just working on kind of predicting using our background knowledge. Okay, let's get into the meat of this. So this is the definition of tone. It expresses an author's attitude toward his or her subject. In works of fiction, authors use tone to draw readers into stories, to arouse their emotions and interest, and to guide the reactions to particular characters, plots, and settings. So the main word here is attitude, attitude towards something, his subject, what he's writing about, the plot. So thinking about what the author is saying and how they are saying it. There are 2 types of tone. One is objective, and it's usually used for nonfiction writing, so it's neutral and factual. So if someone's writing a scientific article about frogs, they're not going to get all angry about frogs. They're just going to give you information, or they're not going to probably not going to get sad and say, "Oh, the frog is such a sad creature." And it no, that's not objective. That's coming into subjective. So when you think objective tone, it's really just a neutral tone. It's scientific writings. A lot of the times it's writings about history. So think about your civics classes. Usually they're just going to give you the facts and the events. So Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, not saying Christopher Columbus the idiot or having any sort of words that show an attitude. Subjective tone is where we start showing an attitude. It's when you express opinions, feelings, and judgments, and it's usually used in fiction or in writing that relates an author's personal experiences. So if they're writing fiction, that means they're writing a story that they've made up or about anything that they've made up. You start to get the subjective tone, which just means opinions, attitudes, judgments. So if you think about like hot topics today, so if one of you decided to write an article about Donald Trump, I've had conversations with lots of you saying you don't agree with Donald Trump. So you would express your opinion. You might call him a moron. You might say he doesn't know anything. So that's going to express your angry tone. So just think about the difference between these two and know that we're mostly using subjective tone. And for the crucible, we will only be focusing on subjective tone. So it can be any human emotion or attitude. So here's a list of examples. It can have a compassionate tone, a serious tone, humorous tone, sentimental, meaning lots of feelings, nostalgic, comfortable, optimistic, pessimistic, and so on. So part of learning tone is knowing your adjectives clearly. If there's some of these words that you don't know, I would suggest looking them up. But like nostalgic, for example, means when you are thinking about past experiences in your past. Maybe you were dating a certain girl or dating a certain boy, and they broke up with you and you didn't want it. You might think to the times you had with him or her and think, oh man, those were the best times. I wish I still had them. That would be a nostalgic tone. So yeah, these are just the adjectives. Mostly you're gonna explain tone with adjectives, but you can also use nouns, and we'll get into that later. So the tools of tone. Here's what authors do to show tone in their writing. They choose specific words to express the emotions that they want to portray. For instance, an author who wants to describe a man walking through a graveyard might select the word prowl to describe the man's actions instead of the word stroll, which paints a less sinister picture. So all this is saying is if you said the man prowled through the graveyard, it sounds more frightening and sinister and scary than saying he strolled through the graveyard. He jumped through the graveyard. So word choice, such as the difference in these two, can play a big difference in the author's attitude and the tone of a specific piece of writing. The second thing they can do is arrange their words in a particular way to help communicate their tone. So notice the difference between bang, the door slammed shut, and the door slammed shut with a bang. The former, the first one, presents a more startling and intense tone than the latter, the second one. So starting with bang is more startling, more intense than ending with bang. So the tone here is startling, intense. The tone here is more neutral. Third thing an author can do is use details and imagery. Details and imagery also help them convey their attitudes toward their subjects, so they can show their attitudes toward their subjects in their writing. An author might, for instance, describe a black cat with glowing green eyes who slinks through the house on a mission known only to herself. Or the author might write about a black cat lazily lounging in a sunbeam with eyes half closed. The first description presents a suspenseful tone, while the second paints a comfortable, cozy picture. So the first one, you can see the cat is kind of slinking around the house. It has glowing green eyes on a mission. So it's suspense. You're wondering what he's doing, this cat. While the second one is lazily lounging. So it's a comfortable tone, cozy picture. So just think about the difference in the attitude of the writing. Lastly, fourthly, figurative language, which compares dissimilar things, so unlike things, to make a literary point, it helps authors in communicating their tone. For instance, an author might describe a surprised child as having eyes as big as dinner plates. This kind of language creates a humorous tone, while a description of a surprised child hiding behind her mother is more serious in tone. So think about the image it puts in your head, and that can help you figure out what an author's tone is. So a child with eyes as big as dinner plates is comical. It seems like a cartoon. That's why it has a humorous tone. While a surprised child hiding behind their mother, kind of crying, sobbing, looking fearful, is much more serious. So it's really up to the author to make the decisions to create a specific tone. And when you're thinking about tone, think about the feeling that you get as a reader as you read a particular passage or text. So your job is to identify the author's tone by using the clues, these four main things, left by the author's word choice and arrangement, so the order, details and imagery, and figurative language. So kind of consider all these things as you read for tone, and we'll do that. Here's a little bit more, kind of a more simple way of putting it. Doesn't mean the other way is not important. So that authors can convey feeling in writing the same way that people convey feeling through tone of voice. Writers, though, must rely only on the printed word and cannot use inflection. So me sounding angry versus happy, happy, joy, joy. So that's inflection. Volume or gestures to make their point. So here's an example of a sentence that conveys an arrogant tone. So arrogant is when you're so confident in yourself that it's annoying. So John surveyed his classmates, congratulating himself for snatching the highest grade without studying at all, unlike all the other idiots in the class. So think about the words in this sentence that suggest this feeling of arrogance. So if I'm looking at this, I'm thinking congratulating himself. That's particular word choice by the author. If he's congratulating himself, he's kind of arrogant. He's like, good job, me. It's arrogant. It'd be different if this was gone. So snatching the highest grade, he took it without studying at all, unlike all of the other idiots. So this word idiot is a specific word choice, specific diction, and it tells me that he thinks the other students are idiots, which is kind of an arrogant position to hold. So the tone here overall is arrogance. If you took out idiots and you replaced it with students, and if you took out congratulating himself, you might have a sentence like, John surveyed his classmates. Happy with snatching the highest grade in the class, unlike the other students in the class. So if you just had it like that, it doesn't sound quite so arrogant. So the word choice is really important. All right, let's practice together. So here are the possible choices of tone. We have suspenseful, which is when you're building suspense. You don't know what's going to happen next. Humorous, you should know. Nostalgic, I mentioned earlier. And then it's when you're longing for the past, when you want the past to be now. You miss your past, like in the girlfriend example, boyfriend example. And critical. And critical means when you are looking at something and you're saying, this is wrong, or I don't agree with this. So you can be critical of, again, Donald Trump. If you don't agree with him, you might be critical of Barack Obama if you don't like his policies. So let's look at this example. Think about the word choice. Think about figurative language. Think about all the things on the previous slides. So the bright rooms, cozy nooks, slightly shabby furnishings, and numerous knickknacks reminded the man of his grandmother's home, where he had spent many happy hours. So think about it for a second. Pause if you need to. Which of the four tones did you select? If you said nostalgic, you're right. Notice how the author added the detail about the man spending many happy hours at his grandmother's house. So he's thinking about the past. He was reminded of the past in his grandmother's home. So this is how we know the tone is nostalgic. And the next example is, the first thing he noticed when he walked into the room was the shabby furniture that looked like it had seen better days. He squinted against the bright light pouring through the windows, unblocked by curtains, and frowned at the knickknacks scattered randomly throughout the room. So here, what do you think? Is it suspenseful? Is it humorous? Is it nostalgic? Is it critical? If you said critical, you're right. So pay attention to specific word choices like frowned. Where is it? Frowned right here. And seen better days. So the furniture was shabby, it was bad, it was run down, it was beaten. So he's critical of the state that the room is in. And these things are scattered. They're not nicely placed, they're scattered. So it has a really negative tone, it has a critical tone. Next one, he edged his way, and you'll notice that each of these passages is about the same thing, but with a different tone. So the event is entering a room. He edged his way into the room, unsure what he might discover. The shabby furnishings took on a slightly sinister air, and he wondered what might be hiding behind them. Even the numerous knickknacks seemed a bit threatening as he approached, as if they might jump out at him suddenly. The bright light glaring through the windows did nothing to ease his apprehension. In fact, it seemed to be trying to blind him. So if you answered suspenseful for the tone, you're right. So the author uses really interesting imagery and some figurative language as well to ramp up the suspense. So he edged his way into the room, word choice there. Um, Everything took on a slightly sinister air. So furniture is taking a sinister air. That's using imagery again, and it's also kind of using figurative language. He's personifying the furniture. He's giving it human qualities. He wondered what might be hiding behind them. Another example of the figurative language is everything seemed threatening, as if it might jump out. So as if these knickknacks, these things scattered about, might jump out. And the things are also trying to blind him. So all these things build a tone of suspense, like what's going to happen next. It's so suspenseful. Last one, half blinded by the bright light beaming through the windows, he tripped into the room, bounced off of several pieces of shabby furniture, and knocked a few knickknacks off their resting places, and finally landed on the floor with a loud plunk. So this one is supposed to be humorous. So if you picked humorous, you're right. So he tripped around, he knocked, so here the actions are kind of making it humorous. He knocked things about and landed on the floor with a loud plunk. So the plunk is also trying to be funny, trying to be humorous. Could have done a better job being funny, but that's the overall mood, and if you had to pick between four, that's the most appropriate one. Here are just a few more examples. If you want, you can pause the videos and look through them. If you had trouble with the last four, I'd recommend pausing, looking at the word here, angry, and then reading the sentence and thinking about why the tone is angry. You can go through the list. So here are just a few tips, more tips on annotating for tone. You can look for specific images or think about the images that are in your mind as you read. Look at the diction. I can't stress that enough. Look at the word choice. Diction means word choice. If you don't understand them, look them up. But mostly you're thinking, okay, what kinds of feelings am I getting as I read this passage? What is the overall feeling I get? What is the effect of these words? You don't have to write your response here. Look at detail to figure out tone. So what are the specific details that have been included? So like knocking things over helped us know that it was humorous. Things jumping out at the man let us know that it was a sinister, suspenseful tone. So if you're having trouble, you can list as many feeling words as you can to describe the tone of any writing that you're looking at. How do you think? You can write how you think the author feels about what is happening. So remember, it's the author's attitude. Pay careful attention to word choice, again, word choice, and comments regarding the themes, actions, and topics covered in the text. So now let's think about the Crucible really quickly, then you can get reading and think about tone as you read Act 2. So how does Miller feel about the events in the Crucible? In the following, we'll be reading a passage. What is his tone regarding Reverend Hale? So what impression does he give in his narration? What tone words come to mind? And how do we read for tone in a complex piece when it's not so obvious? So this looks like a lot. I'd recommend, I'm going to quickly go through it. The video is already at 16, 17 minutes, so if you feel like you have a good grasp, go ahead. But this is a complex passage from page 33. It's actually a moment in which the play stops. It's no longer the players, the actors, and the action in Salem. It's Arthur Miller stopping the play and directly talking about Reverend Hale. So he's giving his attitude. He's creating a tone here. So think about all these different things and what his tone could be. So like almost all men of learning, Reverend Hale, spent a good deal of his time pondering the invisible world, especially since he had himself encountered a witch in his parish, his village, not long before. That woman, however, turned into a mere pest under his searching scrutiny, and the child she had allegedly been afflicting recovered her normal behavior after Hale had given her his kindness and a few days of rest in his own house. However, that experience never raised a doubt in his mind as to the reality of the underworld or the existence of Lucifer's many-faced lieutenants, so Satan's servants, on earth. And his belief is not to his discredit, so it's not to give him discredit, it's not to prove him wrong. Better minds, better brains, better people than Hale's were, and still are today, convinced that there's a society of spirits beyond our ken. So a society of spirits like heaven and hell, demons and angels, beyond our vision. One cannot help noting that one of his lines has never raised a laugh in any audience that has seen this play. It is his assurance that we cannot look to superstition in this. The devil is precise. So evidently we are not quite certain even now whether diabolism is holy and not to be scoffed at, so to laugh at it, to not take it seriously. And it is no incident that we should be so bemused. So this is a really complex part of the play. It took me a lot of thinking. I kind of bolded the areas where I think his tone is clear. So what is his tone? Is it critical? Is it disbelieving? Is it sarcastic? Well, I think it's all three. So how is he critical? Why do I think he's critical? Well, I think he's critical toward religion in Salem. These are the Puritans, remember, the very, very religious people. So he's critical because he's pointing out that men of learning, better minds than Hale's, which means intelligent men, spend much of their time thinking about, pondering the invisible world. So he's showing that he thinks they should be thinking about the real world and the consequences in the real world, and not an invisible world of heaven and hell that can't directly be proven. You can only have faith. He shows that he is highly critical of these men's intelligence because he equates their intelligence with their knowledge of religion. So he's like, yeah, Hale knows a lot about witches and wizardry and things like that, but he spends too much time on that and not enough time thinking about whether people are lying or not, or how people act in social situations. One more thing, and you can read the rest, is that his word choice shows his critical tone. So this word allegedly, if you don't know what it means, please use actively learn, use the define tool to get the definition. It means supposedly. So he shows that he does not really think that this woman was affected by witchcraft. She was allegedly afflicted, allegedly affected, and really returned to normal really quickly. So he's suspicious of this. He's like, how can she return so quickly to being normal after being a witch? Well, it's because there's no such thing as witchcraft. So he's critical toward the events of the play, and here he's critical toward Reverend Hale and his expertise. So you can read through this, read through what I bolded, and think about why I think he is critical.